Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Reacts. So today we are looking at Halloween 2007. As always, I'm going to give you guys my positives and my negatives on the movie, so let's get to it. So Halloween was released in 2007 and it's a remake or reimagining of the 1978 classic. What actually sets this movie apart from that original movie is they delve a lot more into Michael's past, so it's almost a prequel of sorts, especially with the first half of this movie, where we look at Michael's home life and kind of just how he was dealing at the time and what made him become the shape or the boogeyman that we know today. And guys, for me, I've seen this movie a couple of times. When I first watched this movie in cinemas, I was not a fan of it. Straight away when you watch this movie, you can tell it's not a typical Halloween movie. It very much is in the vein of Rob Zombie's other works. The movie picks up in the past where we see a young Michael Myers struggling with his home life with a really dysfunctional family. Michael himself, he is killing young animals at a young age right in those opening scenes, so we see already he's becoming the shape that we know today. I will say though, I like my Michael being supernatural and just something that you cannot explain. I like Michael being the shape, this kind of force of nature, and nobody really knows why he is the way he is. The only characters in his family he seems to get on with are his mother and his little sister Boo, who would eventually become Laurie Strode. Immediately with the first few scenes of this movie, you do definitely see what Rob Zombie wanted to do. Now I know at the time he kind of wanted this whole thing to be a reimagining, his version of the story. And the first half, you can definitely tell that. The first half feels a lot different than the second half. Second half, I will say, feels a lot more subdued. We also see that carries over to his school life where he's being bullied in school. Again, as a Rob Zombie film, there's nothing but kind of cuss words and swearing in those scenes also. I did find that a bit odd, and it does take you out of the film. A few times in the movie that just the dialogue doesn't gel too much because they're laden with swear words. I will say Michael's first kill where he takes out his school bully is definitely one of the most disturbing and harrowing scenes in the whole film. You see the bully screaming in agony for help in the middle of the woods. You can see when Michael what he's eventually going to become. Those scenes, they do feel a little bit more relevant to the older Halloween films, especially when you add in John Carpenter's score in those scenes. From there we get kind of a reimagining of the opening scene of the original Halloween. In the original he does kill his sister Judah, whereas in this one he kills a whole lot more people. So he kills his stepdad, he kills Judah and her boyfriend, and again, just to up the factor and make this a little bit more of a Rob Zombie movie, the entire thing is a lot more brutal. Sherry Moon Zombie gives an absolutely amazing performance in this movie. She's definitely one of the highlights of the whole film as Michael Myers' mother. She comes home to discover the bodies of her family members, and just her screams in those scenes are absolutely harrowing. It is quite disturbing to see that on screen, but just the performance she gives will stop you in your breath. She's definitely one of my favourite parts of this entire remake. And that continues with her as Michael goes off to Smithsgrove. So during those scenes, she is constantly there with him, just trying to save what is left of her son and trying to understand what exactly has happened to her family. And you can see that in her performance. You can see she's pretty much a broken woman with nothing left to live for. There's a scene in this movie where she commits suicide, and it is a very poignant scene. It's a very sad, depressing scene. It shows you exactly what happens when somebody commits suicide. We also get the inclusion of Dr. Loomis, this time played by Malcolm McDowell. Now he is a very similar Loomis in this movie, maybe not so in the next film, but in this one I didn't mind his performance. I also really liked the scenes with him and Michael. That was something we've always kind of wanted in a Halloween movie for years, and they were quite interesting. A lot of people have complained that Michael talks in those scenes, but you've got to remember he is a young boy, and he was a young boy before he killed Judith. I do like how you see this descent of him putting on the mask and not speaking anymore. While Michael is in Smithsgrove, he does bond with Loomis a lot, which was actually good again for later scenes in this movie. As well as that, Michael does find kind of friends with a security guard that's there at the time. I like that little relationship they had. Now when Michael gets older, he does eventually break out of the asylum, and unfortunately he takes out the guard as well. Now, there are two different versions of this movie. There are an unrated version and a regular theatrical version. For me, I prefer the theatrical version a lot more. I find the unrated version a bit too brutal. It's a lot more bloodier than the original one, and as well as that, there's a few scenes in there that I just don't like at all. One in particular is when Michael escapes the asylum. There's a rape scene that happens that again was just so unnecessary. I don't know why they put it in there. It comes across as really disgusting, and again there was just no reason for it. Michael as well, the way he kills in those parts of the movie, they are a lot more brutal and again different than what we had seen. Michael has always been kind of a silent killer that comes out of the darkness. With this one, when he becomes of age, he's almost like a wrestler. So he's almost like the Hulk in those scenes. He's absolutely huge and brutal. He looks like a person that could break down walls, almost like Jason Voorhees. For me, again, I like seeing my Michael Myers as a regular guy that you can't explain. Just someone who looks like a regular human who doesn't die. I like that about Michael. I don't want him to be this big ass Hulk wrestler that's unstoppable, almost like a zombie. Though the scenes where Michael does escape are still quite fun. Yes, as a Halloween fan they may be a bit too brutal, but just as a horror fan in general, they're fun scenes to watch. As well as that, there are a few cameos thrown in there from actors from other Rob Zombie films, which was a fun little inclusion. When Michael escapes, he does eventually go back to Haddonfield, and a second part of this movie starts. Now, as I said, the second part of this movie is a lot tamer than that first part. There's not as much swear words. The characters are a little bit more relatable and likable. As well as that, the film itself was actually shot on the same streets that did the original Halloween, and I've always just liked that about this. It does feel familiar to the original movie. The second part of this movie though, you can tell immediately it's not Rob Zombie's version of Halloween. It does feel a lot like that original one. I didn't mind that completely, but at the same time it does come across as a little bit boring. You kind of know the events that are going to unfold, you know the characters and what they're all about. We still have Tommy Doyle in there, we still have Lindsay Wallace, so the whole thing does feel like a shot for shot remake for quite some time. Now, as the movie progresses, as Michael eventually attacks and kills, it does pick up, but those first few scenes where we switch to Haddonfield are just a bit too reminiscent of the original movie. I will say I do like how they explain Michael's mask in this movie. So in the first half of the movie, when Michael attacks the family, Judith's boyfriend actually brings over the iconic mask. So as a kid, Michael throws that mask on, and they are really fun scenes just to kind of see a little kid with that mask on, and actually looks quite cool. The mask itself is probably the closest we'd gone to that point to the original movie. It looks absolutely amazing in this film. Michael eventually he hides it under the floorboards. When he returns to Haddonfield all those years later, it's there waiting for him, and it kind of has a bit of a more grungy look to it. It's a bit worn, a bit battered from being on the floorboards for all those years. But once he puts it on, he looks like Michael Myers. I will say I don't like the height of Tyler Mane in this movie. I don't like the size of him, but the mask, they get spot on. There's also a few subtle scenes where we kind of see Michael watching people from the distance. There's a scene in the film where he's kind of following Laurie through the streets of Haddonfield. Those scenes are again probably the closest we got to the original Halloween. When Michael does finally attack in the second part of this movie, it does pick things up quite a bit. Again, I will say I didn't enjoy the second half of this movie as much originally, but as the night goes on, as Michael kind of takes out Linda, attacks Annie and Laurie, it does definitely pick up. There's a couple of scenes in this, Annie's in particular, where Michael takes her on. That is a great scene. It's a very small chase sequence, but it's intense, and because it's Danielle Harris, you want her character to get out of here. You know it's Annie, so you know she dies in the original, so adds a little bit of tension that you don't know what happened to this character. As well as that, when Laurie finally goes over and discovers the carnage at the house that Annie is in, the setup is actually quite great. So we have Bob's body kind of hanging with a pumpkin over his head. I thought that was really good, and again, if we'd seen more of those kind of subtleties throughout the film, I think I'd have enjoyed it a lot more. The second half of the film as well, the cinematography in the daytime shots are quite warm, autumn type colours, but once we go to the nighttime shots, Zombie actually puts in that kind of blue tint onto the screen again. So they are very eerie, creepy shots, especially where we can see Michael from the distance. There's one scene in particular where he's on a balcony looking down, and he looks absolutely great because of how it's shot. They delve into the story between Laurie and Michael a lot more, especially their sibling story. At one point Michael takes Laurie, kind of kidnapped her, and he's just showing her that he doesn't want to kill her, that she's kind of the most precious thing in his life. Now, Scout Taylor Compton, who plays Laurie Strode, gives a great performance in this movie, but she screams so much in the second half of this movie that she just kind of becomes irritating. The character of Laurie Strode in this one, you don't care for her as much. She comes across as a little bit grating. Her performance in this, it's a good performance, but the character herself is very bouncy. She's very irritating. She doesn't let up for the whole film. The first part she's in, she's just a very bouncy, energetic character. The second part where she's being attacked, she does not stop screaming. So I didn't like that about it. I like Michael's characterization in the second part of the movie, where they're showing that he's not this completely evil character. Now again, for Myers in the original series, he's all out evil, but again, if I look at this in a different outlook, in a different light, I can see why they want to make it slightly different and just show his character can be relatable. The kills in this one as well, as I said, they are quite good. They are very brutal and bloody, but at the same time, there's no particular kill I remember in this movie. Out of every scene in the entire film, the kill that is my favourite is when he kills the school bully, which is the first kill of the movie. So from there, I do feel like it goes downhill. I like the stepfather's kill. I thought that was quite creative, but again, there's just nothing to write home about. Loomis obviously is on the hunt with Cher Brackett, this time played by Brad Dourif, who most would know as Chucky. That's one thing very quickly I found strange with this movie, is hearing Chucky's voice in a Halloween movie. But back to the third act of this movie, it is definitely a tension-filled climax of the movie. There are a few scenes in there are quite seat jumpers, one in particular where Michael comes through a wall and grabs Laurie. That is a huge jump scare in this movie, and I liked it. And the ending of the film, though, it goes on a little bit too long. At one point we think Michael's been taken out by Loomis. He shoots him in a pool. Michael comes back and tears Laurie out a window, so it kind of goes on a little bit too long. I will say though, I like the ending of this movie. So Laurie pretty much shoots Michael in the face, and I remember when I watched that in cinemas, I was shocked to see that ending, especially when you consider the original ending to this movie, where Michael being shot 6 times out of the balcony and we thought he was dead. With the remake, we'd gotten used to Michael not dying. So when Laurie's shooting him in the face, it was a very definitive ending to that movie, and I do kind of wish they had just left it there. I've always been a bit back and forth with this movie. It is definitely a reimagining of the original Halloween, and it's something that really remake should do more of. Take these characters and kind of mix them up slightly while leaving that central storyline there. I didn't like the Rob Zombie feel to this movie. I did like the first part of the film itself, but just the overuse of swearing, the brutalness of it, and just the unnecessariness of some scenes let the film down. With the second half at the same time, Rob Zombie kind of went more with what the studio wanted, and it did come across as a bit more bland. So it's unfortunate they couldn't kind of meld those two things together and make a better film, but overall I like the movie. Is it one of my favourite Halloween movies? Of course not. It's just a different version of Halloween. I've always seen it as kind of an alternative universe version of the movies, but I like it. I'll throw it on, and as the years go on, I do appreciate it a lot more. If you like this movie, guys, let me know what you like about it in the comments below. Don't forget, guys, subscribe to the channel if you like what you're seeing, and pop on the notification bell. Next up, guys, during the week I'm going to have my top 10 80s movie, and we're going to be finishing up our Halloween series with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Again, guys, subscribe to the channel if you like what you're seeing, and until next time, Heidi ho.